Welcome to Table for One. I'm the narrator, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about Voidfall, and specifically, and this is by request, we'll be going over all the iconography on the Galactic board, just to help you better understand it. Let's get rolling. Alright, so we're going to talk about the Galactic board in this video. I know this is kind of far away. I'll sit here and point to it and flip it over and stuff, but I'm going to try and zoom in with maybe some big graphics and put some of that on the screen. So if that's covering up what I'm doing with my hands, that's okay. So I'm going to go over the competitive side first because it's quicker, and then the solo and co-op side second. There's a link in the description if you just want to jump to this side. There's going to be some overlap, but they're not entirely the same. So I'll start with the competitive side. So there's three colors here, and we're talking about, so we've got blue for part A, which is the preparation phase, B for the focus part of each cycle, which is in yellow, and then this red part is part C, that's the evaluation phase. So starting with the preparation phase, what this is telling you here is not at the beginning of cycle 1, but if it's the beginning of cycles 2 or 3, you remove the bottommost trade token from whatever's here on the offer. And remember, some of them may be double stacked. You just, whatever's the bottom one, just like whichever one you would take if you were taking the next trade token, you remove it. You don't do that cycle 1 because cycle 1, you've just set up the game. But cycle 2, cycle 3, you do. So that's A1. A2 says for cycle 1, do nothing. And it's referring to this section here where we've got the improved text. If it's the beginning of cycle 2, you can have improved text now. So that's when you remove that tech blocker tile. And then at the beginning of cycle 3, during the preparation phase, you then remove whatever improved texts are still there and replace them with the 4 others that have not been on the offer yet. Step 3 in the preparation phase for competitive is you select your turn order, and you do this in ascending order of influence. So whoever has the least influence gets to pick their turn order first. It doesn't mean they have to go first, they just pick their space first. On up and up until you get to the whoever's got the most influence gets the last choice. And then the last part of the preparation phase, step 4, is you reveal the next galactic event. So you flip it over and you do all the things that it tells you to do. And then it'll also reveal the objectives for this galactic cycle. And so the iconography here is really clever. It's showing you for part 4 here in blue, you're going to do this section of the galactic event card, which tells you, some things that each player must do right now. And sometimes there's things you may do. You might have a choice, but you do this first. And then this part, shooting off of here, this top corner is, it tells you how many focus cards you get to play this cycle. So that's why it's pointing to the focus phase. And then these objectives here are pointing back here because these are going to come back at the end of the cycle in the evaluation phase. So it's actually pretty helpful when you understand how to read it. So that's what you do in the preparation phase. In the focus phase, you do part 1, part 2, and then part 3 on each player's turn, one at a time. So the first thing is you play one focus card from your hand, and then you may play a trade token, and you may play an agenda card, up to 1 of each. When you play the focus card, it allows you to take 2 actions from that card and not equal. You cannot take the same action twice. When you play the trade token, it allows you to take 1 action from that same focus card, not equal to any of the other actions you've taken. So there's 3 actions per focus card. So basically you always take 2 out of 3, and the trade token allows you to take the 3rd. And then if you play an agenda, you can take the agenda action as well. And this part 2, you can take any of these actions in any order. But you must play the trade token and or agenda card up front. You can't start taking these actions and then maybe they gain you a trade token and an agenda card. You can't play them right now. You have to play these up front in order to do any of these actions. Otherwise, you've got to hold on to them. After you've taken all your actions, step 3 of the focus phase is the cleanup step. So first you check each sector tile and make sure you have no more than 2 fleet tokens on it. So you can have that's up to 6 fleet power, cubes, but no more than 2 tokens. And so say you have basic dreadnoughts. The rule on those is you can only have 1 fleet power per token. So that would be a max of 2 dreadnought tokens in that sector with 1 power on each. So if you have too many in any sector, you're just going to have to recall that fleet power in any way that you want until you're down to 2 tokens. And don't forget, if you have multiple tokens that are the same type, as long as there's no restriction, like for basic and improved dreadnoughts or basic and improved carriers, if you've got, say, 3 fleet tokens of corvettes and there's 1 fleet power on each, you can reduce those down to 1 corvette with 3 fleet power on it and just get rid of the other 2 tokens. That's absolutely legal. Then the next step is you make sure you have no more than 4 glory tokens. If you have more than 4, you're going to have to discard down to 4, and you can discard in any order you want. So you'll probably want to get rid of the lowest value tokens first. Then if you played an agenda this focus phase, you have the option to tuck it into your player mat as long as it is not the same agenda type as one that is already tucked into your player mat. So that's why it says that not equal. So if you have a wealth agenda, you can't tuck another wealth agenda in. You can replace your old wealth agenda, but you can't have more than one of the same type. And then this says you have to save any of your, or if you earned any trade tokens, you now need to place them on your open agenda spots. So each agenda card can hold up to 1 trade token. So you need to slot them. And if you don't have a slot, you need to return it to the Galactic board. And of course, these are barring any technologies that overwrite these rules, like central surveillance or escape pods. So then you keep repeating this focus phase over and over again until everyone has taken the number of has played the number of focus cards that equals however many are in this galactic cycle. And then you move on to step C. That's the evaluations phase. So it starts with a skirmish. In cycle 1, you just calculate the skirmish based off of your corruption on your house mat, which excludes technologies like decontamination chambers. Then you also have to take into effect things like house abilities, like how Cheveus has +1 Voidborn fleet power for skirmishes. Galactic events could modify them, those sorts of things. So you skirmish at the end of cycle 1. At the end of cycles 2 and 3, you calculate your skirmish with 1 additional Voidborn fleet power, and you do that in turn order. After these skirmishes, next is time to pay upkeep. That's step 2. So you look at the upkeep on all the sector tiles that you control. So it's typically 1 upkeep for any sector tile that has all of its guild spots filled, 1 upkeep for any sector tile that has all of its installation spots filled, and then some sector tiles just additionally have upkeep just for controlling the tile. And then each agenda that you have slotted that does not have a trade token on it is 2 upkeep. So you calculate all your upkeep, then you need to pay for your upkeep. You need to satisfy it. So for each upkeep that you have to satisfy, there is a cost of 1 food or 2 energy or 2 materials in any combination. So 2 energy, 2 materials, or 1 of each. For each upkeep that you can't satisfy, you must pay 3 influence, and you cannot choose to not pay and just use the influence. You have to pay if you can. Then step 3, after everyone's paid upkeep, is the objectives from the Galactic Event. So you refer back to the Galactic Event. There's typically 2 objectives, and usually a choice. If you've achieved both of them, you can choose which one you want to gain the bonus from. So gain bonuses from the Galactic Event. And then step 4 is for each pure agenda that you have, you can score that agenda card. So you score all the agendas that you have slotted that are pure, and you gain your influence. That's the end of the cycle. And then if that was the end of cycle 1, you start back over at the preparation phase for cycle 2. At the end of cycle 2, you start back over preparation phase for cycle 3. And at the end of cycle 3, that's the end of the game. So at that point, whoever has the most influence wins. And if there's a tie, you have to duke it out in 4-dimensional space. As a quick reminder, if you're looking for more detail on some of these things, I've got a whole video dedicated to trade tokens and agendas. I've got a whole video dedicated to upkeep, and I've got a whole video dedicated to figuring out Voidborn fleet power for skirmishes. So I'll put a link in the description for some of those. And now we're going to flip it over to the co-op side, which includes solo. The solo is just 1-player co-op. So it's going to have all the same stuff, I think, as the competitive side, but then it's going to have some additional things too. So let's go over what's on here. And before I forget, for those of you who just clicked to this chapter, some of these things I've covered in more detail in other videos. We're going to talk about the crisis board and alert cards, I've got a whole video dedicated to that. Calculating Voidboard fleet power for skirmishes, I've got a video dedicated to that. Calculating Upkeep, I've got a video for that. Calculating the Voidborn score at the end of the game, there's a video about that. And agendas and trade tokens and everything around those, I've got a video for that too. So if you want detail on any of those pieces, I've got other videos for that. I'll put the links in the description. But here we go. So the Galactic board is split into 3 pieces, A, B, and C. They've got different colors. A is blue, B is this yellowish, and C is red. These are the preparation phase, the focus phase, and the evaluation phase for each cycle. And each step is numbered. So it starts on 0 for the preparation phase here on the co-op side. So steps 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the focus phase has a step 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the evaluation phase has steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's go through them all in order. So step 0 only applies to cycles 2 and 3. You don't do it in the first cycle. So it's assuming for cycle 1, you just set up the game and you're going to place down here either 3 joint focus cards or 3 heroic focus cards, depending on if you're playing co-op or solo, multiplayer co-op or solo. But if it is cycle 2 or 3, this is saying in step 0, you take whatever cards are here, you wipe them, and you replace them with new ones. So you're going to refresh those 3 cards. That's what this is. The next thing that it says here is any alert cards that you revealed. So those are the ones with numbers 1, 2, 3, or war. Any that you've revealed from the previous cycle, you take them back. They're just out of the war cards you set aside. You never get the same war card twice. And the number cards, just put them to the side for a second. And then you need to, this is saying check the difficulty cards, so easy, medium, or hard. And it tells you for whatever cycle you're in, how many number 1, 2, and 3 alert cards and war cards you need to add to the deck for this cycle. So your deck may have leftover unrevealed alert cards from the previous cycle. You leave them there. You add whatever the difficulty card tells you to for 1s, 2s, 3s, and maybe another war card. Then you can shuffle up that deck, and that's your new alert deck for this cycle. Set it down. And it's also saying this bottom part is, depending on which difficulty you're on, see if you're supposed to put a harbinger on the crisis board. And if you are, then do that at this time. So either on the economic or military track. So I believe on the easy mode, you'd never put a harbinger on the crisis board off the top of my head. And then on the medium or normal difficulty, you do it at the beginning of cycle 3. And on the hard difficulty, you do it at the beginning of cycle 2. So that's step 0. And again, you only do that before phases 2 and 3. During phase 1, that's kind of part of setup, is placing these 3 focus cards and arranging your alert deck. But as far as refreshing the deck, adding a harbinger, those things will be cycles 2 and 3. So then again, step 1 here, cycle 1 is just set up the trade tokens. So you kind of skip this, but cycles 2 and 3, at this time you would remove the bottommost trade token from here. And that's just going to be whichever one would be the next one that a player would have to take. So, they might be double stacked, but you just take the bottommost single token and remove it from the game. So there's one less. And down here, these symbols here are talking about setup. So in a 1-player game, they're stacked 1 high. You've got 5 of them. You leave this one empty. On a 2-player game, you add that 6th one, so you've got 6 tokens. On a 3-player game, you double stack them on the first 5 spots, leave this one open. And on a 4-player game, you double stack them all the way down, so you've got 12 total tokens. So this down here is just telling you how many trade tokens to use during setup. Then step 2 in the preparation phase, for cycle 1, you cannot have any improved technologies, except for the one that's that you start with beside your player mat. These are not available, so you put the blocker tile. For cycle 2, it's saying you can have these improved technologies, so you remove the blocker tile. And in phase 3, you're refreshing these improved technologies. So whatever's here, you remove it and you replace it with the other 4 improved technologies that have not been on offer yet. For part 3, it says now you determine the turn order. If you're playing solo, you're just always going to be the first player. There's no other players. And if you're playing multiplayer co-op, you determine as a group what order you want to go in. If you're playing on the competitive side, it's typically from lowest influence to highest influence, gets to decide at what point in the turn order they want to be. So if you can't decide as a group, you're probably not cooperating very well, but that would be probably the tiebreaker. If you just can't decide who should go first, whoever's got the lowest influence should decide. and then work your way up. This symbol here with the alert card and the exclamation point, I will come back to that. So after the turn order is decided, step 4 is reveal the next galactic event, and the iconography is pretty good here if you know what you're looking at. So step 4 in the preparation phase is saying do this part of the galactic event card where it tells you, there's usually some things you have to do, and then maybe some choices, and you might get some bonuses. Each player might get the choice to either activate a fleet power or gain a basic tech or something like that. So all that stuff happens here. And then this top right corner of the card is what tells you how many focus cards each player gets to play each cycle. So from there, that tells you to move to part B. And then the Galactic Event also tells you what the objectives are for this cycle, and we're going to come back to those in the evaluation phase, part C. So that's why it's highlighted here and pointing back to here, so we'll come back to that. So we're now moving on to the focus phase. We've done all the preparation. So after we've finished with the Galactic Event, preparation phase, step 0, and there's a 1 here. That's what this symbol's here for. It says, if you're the first player, then you're going to reveal a new alert card. So it'll either be a 1, 2, or 3, let's say for now. And that means each player this turn will have to reveal a 1, a 2, or a 3 crisis card. And then so you'll work your way through the player order. And when you get back to player 1, you'll reveal a new alert card with, again, a 1, 2, or 3. And then you'll reveal each player at the beginning of their focus round will reveal a new 1, 2, or 3 matching that alert card. Now, the other possibility is instead of a 1, 2, or 3, you might reveal a war card, in which case this is saying do not reveal any crisis cards for this round. Instead, every player will resolve the war card on their focus this round. And then again, when you get back to the beginning of player 1, it's a new alert card. Again, I go through that in a lot more detail on the crisis card and alerts video, but that's what this is saying, and that's why this is here to remind you that you reveal a new alert card right before player 1 each round. So then each focus card, each player on their turn during the round, you do part 1, then part 2, then part 3, then part 4. So part 1 is you can play a focus card, and that means you can also get rid of a focus card from your hand to play the matching joint focus or heroic focus from the offer. So you play one focus card, and you can take 2 actions from that focus card, and they cannot be the same action. So, every focus card has 3 actions, you take 2. You can play a trade token to take the 3rd action. So the trade token allows you to play 1 more action from your focus card, but it cannot be equal to any of the other actions you've taken. And then you can play an agenda, which allows you to take an action from the agenda card. So remember, step 1 is play your focus card, place your trade token, play your agenda. You've got to do the focus card. That's why that's highlighted. And then the other 2 are optional. And then part 2 is after you've done that, you can take your focus card actions, your extra 1 from your trade token, or your agenda action in whatever order you want. But you cannot play your focus card, take 2 actions, which is to say gain a trade token and gain an agenda, and then do both those things. You can gain your trade token and agenda, but you can't do those things this turn. You must make those selections at the beginning. Otherwise, you'll have to save them for a future turn. And if at any point during that process you satisfy any crisis, either the current one or one of the ongoing ones on the crisis board, then you can remove it. It's satisfied. That's what that symbol's saying. But of course, it is a little bit misleading. You can satisfy a crisis at any time, even in the preparation phase or evaluation phase. And if you do, you remove it. So don't worry too much. Don't get too hung up on that symbol there. But that's typically when you do resolve a crisis card. So after you've done all your actions, step 3 is the cleanup phase. So you want to check each sector tile, make sure you have no more than 2 fleet tokens on it. That's the max. If you have more than that, you can try and consolidate. So if, for example, you have 3 Corvette fleet tokens and each one has 1 fleet power on it, you can consolidate those all down to 1 fleet token, and then you're good. You remove the other 2. The only stipulations are, your fleet power cubes must stay on the same type of tokens. If you have a Corvette and a destroyer and a sentry. You can't swap between those. And the other stipulation is, of course, some of the technologies like basic dreadnoughts and basic carriers do have a limit on the amount of fleet power you can have on each token. So you've got to stay within those requirements. If you are not able to reduce down, then you're going to have to recall fleet power of your choice in that sector to the active area of your player mat until you get down to 2 fleet tokens. And then you may not have more than 4 glory tokens. So if at this point you have more than 4, you're going to have to discard glory tokens until you get down to 4. And so you'll probably want to discard the ones of the lowest value first. At this point, you can then slot any agenda cards that you've played this cycle. Just they cannot be the same type of agenda as any other agenda that you have slotted on the bottom of your player mat. So that's what that not equal sign is. So if you've just played a wealth agenda, but you already have a wealth agenda slotted, you cannot slot it next to that existing agenda. You can replace it, but you can't have 2 of the same type. And the last part of step 3 here is any trade tokens you earned during the cycle, you need to slot them on an available agenda spot. So each agenda card can hold 1 trade token. And then both of these pieces can be modified by technology. So keep that in mind. I think Central Surveillance lets you have an additional agenda card, and Escape Pods lets you have an additional trade token. So step 4 here is then the Void Advances step, and this is only on the co-op side of the board. So this is saying if there's still an active crisis that you have not completed, which is I suppose the one they're talking about specifically here, whichever one is active, if you have not completed it yet, these are your options. You can either take the penalty and then it's discarded, or you can add it to the crisis board, and crisis cards are added to the right of any harbingers. So that's what the iconography is saying there. And then just keep in mind, some crisis cards can only go to the economic track, some can only go to the military track, and some give you the options. So just add it to the appropriate track, but to the right of any harbingers. Or if it's a war card, then you just have to, solve the war card. You have to do the skirmish for the military track and then pay the economic penalty. Or if you don't take the penalty from a crisis, or don't make it ongoing, or don't want to solve the war card, your other option is to take a catastrophe token in lieu of either of those. Now, if you do that for the crisis card, if you don't want to take the penalty or add it to the board, then you take the catastrophe token and the crisis goes away. If it's a war card, you take the catastrophe token, but you leave the war card out because it might still need to be satisfied by another player. And then the war card stays out until player 1 begins their next turn, and then you put another alert card over it. So that is the focus phase. So you just do that block over and over again on each player's turn until you've taken all the turns that are in the cycle, and then you go to part 3, the evaluation phase, or part C. So the first part of the evaluation phase, this is in player order. Each player resolves the crisis board. So first you do a skirmish with any modifiers that are on the military track, and that skirmish is typically determined by adding up all the corruption on your player mat, minus decontamination chambers, plus any modifiers out there from not just the crisis boards, but things like galactic events, or maybe your house mat. If your house Cheveus, it's always +1. So you do your skirmish, and if it's cycle 2 or 3, whatever that calculation is, you also add 1 more Voidborn fleet power to it. And then after you've had the skirmish, then you satisfy whatever you have to pay on the economic track. So each player does the crisis board in turn order. And then step 2 of the evaluation phase is you need to satisfy your upkeep. So check each sector tile that you have control of. And typically it's 1 upkeep if you filled all the guild slots, 1 upkeep if you filled all the installation slots, and some other sector tiles just are going to charge you some upkeep just for controlling the sector. So you add up all that upkeep plus 2 for every slotted agenda card without a trade token on it. And whatever that number is, that's the number of upkeep you have to satisfy. Again, barring any technologies that might modify that, like energy cells comes to mind. And to satisfy all of that upkeep for each one, you must pay either 1 food or 2 resources of energy and materials in any combination. So 2 energy, 2 materials, or 1 of each. For each upkeep that you cannot satisfy, you must lose 3 influence. Influence cannot go negative, but hopefully it doesn't come down to that. and you cannot choose to spend the influence instead of spending resources. If you have the resources to satisfy the upkeep, you must spend them. So after this upkeep part, the next step is the safe haven step. So for each player, you check to see if you have any sector tiles with no corruption that also have 6 population and 3 or more guilds. For each sector you have that satisfies that criteria, 6 pure population and 3 or more guilds, you may build a level of a safe haven. So you can take a fleet power from your inactive part of your player mat and put it on a safe haven. You might have more than one of those, and each player might have one, so you're going to be building safe havens that way. And if at that time you complete any safe haven, then you take that bonus that's on the safe haven tile. So after you've done that step, then you check the Galactic Event for the objectives. And there's typically 2 objectives, and you can take the bonus from at most one of those. So typically, there's exceptions, but that's when you take the bonuses from the objectives from the Galactic Event. And then step 4 is you look at the agendas that are pure on your player mat and you score them. So remember, your starting agenda can never be corrupted. The other ones can. If they're corrupted, you skip it, but any pure ones, you score them at that time. And if that's the end of cycle 1 or 2, then you go back to the preparation phase and you repeat this whole thing again. If that's the end of cycle 3, then that is the end of the game. You end with that agenda scoring. And on this side of the board, you then calculate the Voidborn score and see if all players have beaten that score individually. So that is the Galactic board and the iconography on it. If you understand it, it does make it easier to keep track of where you are in the game. It's once you've played the game a few times, it's just kind of a handy little reminder that kind of fades into the background. I don't even really look at that stuff anymore, but it's nice to have as a reference on the table. So if that was helpful to you, let me know by leaving a like on the video and a comment, and don't forget to subscribe or share it. Again, this video was by request, so thank you for the request. I think I had some others, so I'm going to work through that backlog of requests too. But if you have other rules questions on Voidfall or any other game that I've played on this channel, let me know and I'll do my best to address it. But I do appreciate the dialogue and keep it coming. So thank you very much for watching Table for One, and I will see you in the next video.